Anthem is struggling with deadlines seemingly being missed or barely being hit. Battlefield 5 also seems to be struggling to keep its audience, and now we have employee leaks that paint a grim picture indeed for Electronic Arts. Hey everyone, and welcome back to another industry report. So things have been very interesting lately. EA have struggled. If it wasn't for Apex Legends, I imagine they'd be in quite a bad place indeed, although Apex actually seems to be struggling itself, having its Twitch viewership actually tank over the last month and a bit, with Fortnite really retaking its lead by quite some distance. Now this latest update is a leak via Jeremy of The Quartering. Now you might think, oh, a leak by a YouTuber. Well, let's be real. I mean, a lot of the game, sites, I mean, for the most part, they are just the personal blogs of staff and press release reposts. So I wouldn't really slag YouTube too much, to be honest, and I do think that Jason Schreier's work is exceptional, but it's not, well, it's the exception, not the rule. Now, as for Jeremy, well, the mechanics by which he gets his leaks, I think, are quite interesting, especially because he does have a pretty good track record with things like Apex Legends actually being first broken by him. Indeed, that's an example of an accurate Electronic Arts leak from Jeremy, which I think lends credence to today's EA leak being a bit more accurate. Now, I mentioned mechanics because I think it's interesting how I think Jeremy gets a lot of his leaks. So he has a strong focus on anti-politically correct content. Well, in a lot of larger companies, it tends to be that there is a correct way to think based on the company's culture, and that means that for people within a company who are not in alignment with the orthodoxy of what you're supposed to think in that company, well, what they actually think will be expressed in their free time, often on YouTube. And having friends in a few big AAA studios myself, it often actually is like that. So seeing what Jeremy covers, I think a lot of those disgruntled employees would be quite likely to leak to him. And I think that's a fair explainer of how the guy's been able to get so many scoops as of late. Now, based on his prior Electronic Arts leak accuracy, I think this one is worth talking about, although of course we cannot jump to conclusions until we see more confirmation. Really, I do think that if EA layoffs were going to happen, well, based on his sources being there, I think we'd probably also maybe see a Schreier article or something like that. Okay, so with that covered, what about this leak? Well, Electronic Arts are reportedly going to be slashing employee bonuses by 50%. Now that's for the frontline, the rank and file staff of the company, so suffice to say, that's a hell of a lot of people. Executives are having their bonuses cut to 75%, so they're taking less of a hit than the rank and file staff and what they have to deal with. Now, Jeremy's source claimed that the C-level employees, like, COO, CFO, CEO, that they probably will not have a cut to their bonuses, which of course, if it is the case, would be an extremely controversial thing because of how large they are, with Andrew Wilson being one of the most highly compensated executives in the gaming industry. Now, why have these cuts happened? What's actually going on? Well, according to a source of Jeremy's, the company is trying to reduce its staffing costs in order to avoid layoffs from Bioware and DICE LA. But that source doesn't really have a positive outlook for either of those studios, saying that if Anthem revenue does not pick up, there could be layoffs at Bioware. Now, being real, that's not much of a surprise to hear. Now, in order to course correct on Anthem, Bioware have recently started hiring specifically in areas where Anthem is particularly weak, such as loot and systems design. But really the question is it too little too late? Will Anthem players come back, especially now that their month of Origin Access premiere has ran out? Well, according to a recent Reddit poll, most wouldn't, although I think it's hard to garner too much from that given the low sample size and kind of, homogenous audience. But I think anybody who just looks at the Anthem situation knows that it's really far from good. Now, from what we know of its development, Anthem is now primarily being handled by Bioware Austin, who are actually soon going to release the next expansion to Star Wars: The Old Republic. Now, over in Edmonton, well, Bioware have their Dragon Age 4 project, and they, a little more recently, are reported to have been warming up their Mass Effect efforts, and that does actually have something in the works, making it likely that we'll see continued development of Anthem along with a new Dragon Age game, and then later down the line, a new Mass Effect game. And this means that if there were to be layoffs, I'm pretty sure they would be at Bioware Austin, as they currently are the studio focused on Anthem, and, well, part of the reason why the layoffs would be happening is the performance of that game. Jeremy's source was clearly not happy with the general state of affairs, though, saying that Bioware staff should have been fired based on the performance of their products. I think that's likely because now all staff are being punished for the mistakes of one or two studios. Ultimately, the problem though is with the Anthem leadership, the lack of creative direction. Eventually, it came to the point with that game where EA had to put their foot down, and Patrick Soderlund does get quite a bit of flack. Much of it, I think, is right, given maybe his mishandling of the Battlefield 5 PR, but in this case, I think it is understandable him pushing for a version of the game that would look impressive and demo well, especially since the last thing that he had seen was a Christmas demo of the game that, by all accounts, was quite mundane indeed. And then, of course, Mass Effect Andromeda faced similar management and creative direction issues with Bioware. And really, it all leaves me thinking, you know, a 50% staff cut for just about everyone, that's really quite unfair. But I think you have to understand the corporate perspective, because from the corporate perspective, their best people are the executives. That's why they've risen to the top. They will see those people as being the people who are the hardest to replace and the most costly to lose, which is why they will more likely protect the bonuses of those executives as much as they can, for they think if they lose that executive experience, then they will lose the trickle-down effect that they think is positive that has on the rest of the company. Plus, there are so many more rank-and-file staff in the company that's where a lot of the cost savings is going to come from. That's probably what EA would think doing this, and I think it does somewhat make sense, but the thing is, well, that's from their perspective. From the other perspective, well, the people who are being punished the most are really those who have done the least wrong. Indeed, they're people who really often need that bonus money to get by. Why? Well, bonuses are pretty wild. Many companies use bonuses and benefits as an excuse to have low base pay for their staff. Why? Well, it means they have less of a cost that they are committed to. It gives them quite a bit of flexibility, and indeed that's the flexibility you see in this leak. Additionally, if you leave before your yearly bonus, well, hey, that's unfortunate, isn't it? So by having more of the compensation shifted into staff bonuses and benefits and that kind of structure, it kind of helps with retention as well, but not really in an ideal way for the staff. Additionally, and I can't say this for sure, but I know like a lot of pension schemes and things like that tend to be based off like your base pay, so I mean there's a bit of a concern there. Now the thing is that many of these game dev hubs are extremely expensive to live in. I saw one Blizzard employee tweeting about her rental being, I think it was $3,500 a month. Now, that's crazy, and that was the cost of living within a 10-minute drive of Blizzard's campus. And from being, personally, I've been in the utter hellscape that is Irvine, California, and having to go 40 minutes on a freeway to get to work there would be just depressing and terrible. I mean, at least from a UK perspective, especially a Belfast one, where, yeah, we have a fantastically convenient city with very low rent indeed. Anyway, the thing is, many of these staff are going to be relying on these bonuses as a large part of their income, and since, the bonuses and the benefits are an excuse for having low base pay, then yeah, 50% cut is massive because those bonuses can be, according to Jeremy and his source, 15 to 20% of the yearly salary. And then really, if it is true that the C-level employees are not having large bonus cuts, then that's really rough. I mean, as Jeremy said, the blame is more on the board for approving those bonus packages, but in an environment where the company is reportedly cutting bonuses across, its structure, it would be unacceptable in my view for the CEO and COO and all of those people to not be touched. There previously had been a small glimmer of hope, back when we covered that overpaid CEO list on the channel, and it was really a part of an overall report that was advocating for responsible shareholder voting, with their key takeaway being that CEO pay rises are beginning to face more resistance, but the progress is quite slow. Now, that actually is all something that kicked off because of US legislation that forced companies to disclose their CEO to median employee wage ratio, so hopefully we will see more progress on that front as time goes on. Ultimately, the people at the top, they should be the people who are the first to take a cut. It's just the right thing to do. It's what Iwata did, and just look how, right it was for Nintendo to deal with their problems in that way. But the thing is, when you look at C-level employees, you're often dealing with professionals. Like, being a professional CFO, often you're not dealing with people who were hired from within a company, but it is important to know that in this case, Andrew Wilson, he did actually move up from being FIFA producer to being CEO when John Riccitiello left the company for Unity. Basically, though, I think this thing, this is the sort of thing that I think happens less if you're dealing with a founder CEO, but it is also important to note that a founder CEO, maybe a Tim Sweeney-like person, well, they're going to have a large stake in the company. So in their case, they get rich based off having ownership of a company worth billions, not by having a large yearly bonus. But anyway, if this whole thing is true, it is, on the whole, I think, sad but not unexpected. Anthem is a game that frankly didn't deserve to do well in the market. it just did not launch in a good state, and the support thus far has not been great. And they're on track to either miss or barely hit their roadmap, which really calls that into question. As for Battlefield 5, man, that's a mess, Features were prioritized that shouldn't have been, the live server seems to have come at the cost of the core Battlefield content that the core users really care about, and that's not even touching on how disastrous the marketing campaign really was for that game's audience. And with Apex seemingly not retaining its player base that well and its growth maybe slowing down, it is a bit of a worrying situation for Electronic Arts, and it seems insane to say that, given how on top of the world they seemed with the insane success of Apex Legends, but you need only look at Twitch and everything that's going on, and it does seem like that is a game that is really losing a bit of its steam, losing some of its thunder. It seems like its update cycle has not been able to compete with that of, say, Fortnite. And also, I have to imagine that their revenue per user is quite a bit lower than Fortnite, given just, how much more effort Fortnite seemed to have put into their cosmetics. So yeah, there we go. I mean, to round it up, hopefully EA will learn, but to be honest with you, I'm not going to be holding my breath. We do need to wait and see for, actual full confirmation of this. Based on Jeremy's track record, where his previous EA leak was, of course, Apex Legends, and was very accurate indeed. I think this is one that is worth talking about. I think there's enough of a track record there for this to be, newsworthy, and it's the sort of thing it hit about 7 p.m. on Friday, so it's really only now going to be hitting the broader news cycle as people begin to talk about it. So, I think this is a pretty reasonable take on it. I think it's the sort of thing that's important to talk about, especially, when we are dealing with problems like, the reported 50% bonus cut, but nothing for the C-level employees, which frankly is, it's just not on. That sort of thing's really bad. Let me know what you think. Thank you very much for watching this video, and with that, I'll see you next time.